Potomac Beads, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to do brick stitch and make it into a triangle shape for a pendant or a pair of earrings, or even to create a nice chain by linking them together. The nice thing about this is you can do it with almost any supplies. Gather up your materials, and if you do want to check out what I used in the video, check the links below me. Let's get started. So to begin with our triangle, again we're doing brick stitch. I have a size 12 needle and some .006 wildfire in a green color. You can make your triangle as big or as small as you want to. We're going to be starting with a small, but I have the large one here to show you how fun it can be to change around patterns and to work with the design, creating all different things, especially if you've got some extra time at home. So I have a stop bead on about 3 feet of thread, and a stop bead is a bead that's eventually going to come off. I like to use a color that's not part of my color scheme that I'm using, so that way when I'm looking at it, it does not get mixed into the design. I have 3 colors of Delicas here: the Galvanized Delight Pewter, the Duracoat Ash Gray, and the Duracoat Opaque Ocean Spray. The first thing I'm going to do is create a ladder stitch of 6 beads of my pewter color. I'm going to add 1 and 2 onto my needle, letting them drop down next to that stop bead. Once you have those 2 on, take your needle and thread and go back through the first bead, going from the stop bead towards that second silver bead. Give a nice tight pull and push it right down next to the stop bead. From there, they should stack right on top of one another, and you have 2 out of 6 on your ladder stitch. To add your next bead, sew back through, creating a kind of circle of thread, the second bead that you added. Now add your third bead. So from a circle, you're coming out the bottom thread of the second Delica. I added a bead, and now I'm going to go into the top of that second Delica. Pull nice and tight, and that third bead sits right on top of the second. The nicer you get your ladder stitch, the nicer the earring will actually become. Go ahead and sew now back through that third bead that you added, giving a nice tight pull. Again, you want to get that ladder stitch so they're right on top of one another. We're going to repeat this 2 more times. The thread's now coming out of the top. I add a bead, sewing from the bottom towards the top, around in a circle. Sew back through the bead that you just added. That's 4, 5, and 1 more will make 6. This is going to be the maximum size of my project. So this is my 6 beads that are in my row that are going to be the center of my triangle. From here, we're going to flip it so the stop bead is sitting up towards the top, and we're going to continue adding beads on the top, creating a triangle on the top, and then we're going to come back and add the triangle on the bottom. To add the triangle at the top, whenever you're doing the brick stitch, we're going to do 2 beads at a time. So we did our 6 rows of ladder, and now we're starting with our brick stitch. I have 2 beads on because of the pattern that I'm doing. I'm going to do an exterior row in that ash gray color, and then an interior triangle that's 3 long of my ocean color. I have 2 beads on to start my first row of my ladder stitch, my brick stitch. And you see those little threads that hop over from one bead to another that we sewed into? In between each bead, this is called a bridge thread. We're going to skip the first one, and we're going to sew into the second one. My needle and thread are going to go under that bridge thread, which this one here, there's actually 2. And I'm going to pull the needle through that bridge thread. From here, it's almost like a crochet loop. My thread and needle are going to go back through that blue one there, up towards the top. What that's going to do is sit that blue bead and also the first bead so that they are sitting right on top of the project. Now you'll notice the first bead, the reason we didn't put 1 bead on is because we don't want any thread showing on the side. If you want it nice and tightly together and you don't want to see any extra thread showing, you're going to start with 2 beads. If you want this to sit correctly, you have to sew back down through bead number 1, catch on to the bridge thread underneath there with the between beads 1 and 2 of your ladder stitch row. So you're basically reinforcing this. So back up through that ash gray, give a nice tight pull, and now those are sitting really, really nicely. From here, go back down your blue, Again, go underneath the bridge thread. And back up through the top. Now, if I'm doing this quickly, I honestly don't do that. I just go right into here and stay after I put those 2 beads on. Now what I'm going to do is continue on with my brick stitch, adding on 1 more of my blue bead, so now I'm 1 at a time, going to that next bridge thread grouping between my next 2 Delicas, sewing under that thread, pulling my needle through, which makes a little loop, and then I'm going to sew back up through that blue bead, making sure that I'm not sewing into or underneath the bridge thread that my thread's going around on. So what happens there is it creates, you can see the thread going underneath. I come out through the bead and I'm slowly pulling to show you how that bead sits right inside there. We're going to do it one more time, going underneath the next set of threads. And it's always going to be the hardest to do it right here on this first row because it's awkward to hold. After you get more rows in, it becomes much easier. Back through the bead, give a nice tight pull. That's 3 of my blue. Naturally, our ladder stitch is going to downgrade and go right now from 6 beads of our center ladder to 5 beads of our first row of brick stitch. Our next brick stitch row is going to end up with 4 beads. Going in here, I put my nice ash gray color in, back up through, and that creates and finishes off my first row. Now you can see I'm coming out of the top and I have 5 beads along. The next row is going to be 4. Again, here at the top, I'm going to add 1 of my ash gray and 1 of my blue beads. Skip 1, 2, go into that second row, so between the 2 blue beads, and sew underneath that bridge thread. When I go underneath the bridge thread and catch on, those 2 beads are going to fall in place. Back up through that blue bead and give a nice tight pull. Now you can see again that ash gray one kind of sits to the side. If you want to do this quickly and you don't care as much, you can just kind of take your needle, pull it over to the side, and give it a nice tight pull. What happens is when we get back in and we do the next row, that'll kind of conform and sit as normal. I'll do a row now and show you this other method for doing that. I'm going to add 1 more blue, and I like to sew from the back towards the front when I'm doing the bridge thread. Whatever feels the most comfortable for you will work best. Go in, pull nice and tight onto my next ash gray, underneath those bridge threads from the row before it. And again, there's 2 there. Whenever there's 2, it's a little bit more difficult. Back up through the ash gray. One more row, we'll do 3 beads, 1 ash gray, 1 blue. So into the second bridge thread, right there, between the 2 blue. It's going to be my final blue on this triangle piece. Up through the blue, and out the top. Again, that one on the side sits a little funky. If you want to, you can go back, go underneath the first bridge thread and so on. I'm going to skip it, and I'm going to show you now as I go in and add my ash gray on this left-hand side, and then go back through that ash gray and bring it towards the top. What you're going to notice now is that that bead underneath, that's kind of not sitting right, that little Delica there, watch what happens when I pull tightly. So ready? That Delica kind of pops in there and will sit nicer. See how I pulled tightly and then it sat right and nice. Same thing's going to happen to this one on the other side. If you're really concerned and you're doing a bigger section, if you want it to not sit kind of wonky into the side, that's where you're going to go back and reinforce and basically connect back to bead number 1 as well. When I get to the top here, I'm going to go in and add my 2 ash colored beads. Skip the first, go into the second, sew through, and back up through my second ash colored bead. To add the final one on, what you would do is add 1 bead and then go back down the first side, it'll kind of sit lateral. If you wanted to sit straight up and down, you'll see a little bit of thread on the side. What I'm going to do instead is just add that nice little decorative pearl to the bottom. I have a 2mm pearl in white. I'm going to go through here, put it on, go through that second bead on the other side, and then straight down my triangle side. So you're going straight down them, the whole row. So my pearl's on. I've taken my needle down through my whole line of my gray beads, and I'm going to give a nice tight pull. Now I'm to the other side. On the other side now, we're going to repeat the exact same thing of the first side, except when we get to the end, what we're going to do is add a wire guard instead of the pearl. The last thing we need to do when we get to the top of our triangle on the other side is add our wire guard, going in one side and then down the other. The wire guard, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's like a little U-channel with two tubes, one on either side. This is going to protect the thread against the ear wire and makes the earring hang really, really nicely. You're going to then go down through that second Delica bead. If you want to, you can reinforce. All I'm going to do is sew straight down that side again. So I'm going down through my line of my Delica beads in the ash gray color, giving a nice tight pull. And then I'm going to weave my thread and needle back over to that starter thread, so that way I can go ahead and tie off my thread ends. Going right back along the ladder stitch, or even if you want to, right down through that side, through the pearl, back up to the other side, and tying off the thread towards the back of the earring. Once you're doing that, then you can go in with your thread burner, burn the thread down, so that way you have it just a little tiny knot on the side. Again, you can really have fun with this and play around with the different patterns, figuring out kind of how to decrease, how to make diamonds, how to make lines, and have a good old time playing around with a lot of the stock that you may already have creating these diamonds. Remember, if you need any materials, there's links below you to shop with us online at PotomacBeads. Also, you can comment below and say what you started with, your starting rows, post pictures in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making, and let people know different patterns that you've tried out. Additionally, make sure you hit that little button right there to subscribe to get regular updates from us here at PotomacBeads. As always, thanks so much for watching, and enjoy learning and making countless amounts of the beautiful brick stitch diamonds. Remember also, if you put a wire guard on the other side, you can even make a chain to do a nice long necklace with lots of little diamonds.